Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending our induction session on the crisis anticipation and risk financing. So today, we're going to be with you within an hour in order to give you a brief induction about the two different types of financing that we have within START Network. Today, my colleague El, as well as myself, we are going to take you through in order to discuss the issues of the current humanitarian response, how anticipation can cover those challenges, what is the START Network financing facility, and the two pillars within that facility. We are going to concentrate more about one of them, which is called START Ready, or as it's known, the disaster risk financing. And then briefly, we are going to talk about the steps in order to have a disaster risk financing system in our country. The main aim of today's session is at the end, we're going to share with you a training need assessment that need to be fulfilled as an organization, not as individuals, in order to develop a training program that fits the needs of the members and their local partners, particularly on the disaster risk financing. We'll ensure that everyone is here with us. So most of the participants are there, logged in, and hopefully within the coming minutes, they are going to continue logging in. El, may you please confirm that you can hear my voice well?
Hi, yes, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. As Mazen said, I'm Eleanor Dorito, and I work alongside Mazen within the Crisis Anticipation and Risk Financing team as the Country Support Manager. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, El. Again, I'm Mazen Husseini. I'm a training advisor with START Network, particularly in the Crisis Anticipation and Risk Financing unit. So for those that haven't heard before about START Network, so START Network was established 10 years ago, and it's consisted right now more than 50 organizations. Some of them are INGOs, some of them are local organizations. And together with our members, we are hoping to have a new era of humanitarian action. Through our programs as START Network, we hope that we transfer the power to local organizations so that at the end of the day, we have locally led actions. We hope that this locally led action is going to shift as well as the power in addition to decentralize the decision making. We hope that we provide a new way of financing, innovative approaches in order to tackle the challenges that haven't been before or haven't been the same scale as it is right now. So currently, we are seeing much more the natural hazards as it is before. May I please ask each one of us to mute him or herself? Thanks so much. So currently, we are facing the hazards, the natural hazards, frequently and more severely. So natural hazards are phenomena that we can see it, we can feel it, we can taste it, like drought, hurricane, or whatever it is. But unfortunately, when the hazard hit an urban area, a vulnerable communities, then it results to casualties in livestock, in the livelihood, in the infrastructure, and most importantly, it results to the death of several innocent civilians. So let's have a scene from a video about the impact of natural disasters on our community.
Extreme weather events are causing destruction more frequently and severely than ever before. Storms, floods, heat waves, diseases, and other types of hazards affect millions of people every year. Crises around the world are intersecting and compounding each other, increasing the risk of conflict, displacement, and hunger. The poorest and most vulnerable are hit hardest, adding to record levels of humanitarian needs in decades.
So that's it. That's what we wanted to see from that, sorry, again. So as we have seen from the video, natural disasters are hitting the most vulnerable communities and increasing the casualties. So this is some figures from the statistics in the last 100 years or more. It shows that drought, flood, and other natural disasters have caused death for millions of people, and they are repetitive occasions, and this repetitiveness, as well as the severity, is increasing, especially with the climate change. So with this, the traditional humanitarian response is unfortunately do not tackle the challenges that we are facing with the natural disasters. The issues with the traditional humanitarian response is that it is reactive. It waits until the crisis is there, the crisis in the media, on the front pages, where donors are interested to fund that response. And we all know about the political decisions related to any funding, whether it's from donors or communities. And then at the end, the centralization of the decision-making, how to respond, which type of interventions we are going to respond and where. And then at the end, the climate change has also exacerbated these problems and these challenges. So with the current humanitarian way of working, we hope that within START Network, we are going to shift that challenge in order to be more proactive in our crisis actions. We hope to have a pool of funds that can provide financial supporting according to the accurate needs and not based upon political decisions. We hope to promote locally led as well as globally connected systems versus the centralization of the system that we have at the time being. And then at the end, have a fairly look at crises, including those that are under the radar. So with this change, we hope that within START Network, we are shifting from that way of working, which is wait until the crisis is there in order to act. People are suffering, and then the response is expensive, to another way of acting, which is being proactive, saving lives and saving costs. So how we can, sorry. One second, please. So how we can do this? Within START Network, we have the START financing facility. Within the START financing facility, we have two main programs. Briefly, I'm going to talk about the first program and we'll jump into the next program. So within this first program, we have the START Fund, which is a pool that we have within the network that allows a member to take the decision in order to respond to any action or to any alert. The START Fund is the fastest pool funding ever globally. It is used for underfunded small to medium scale crises, spikes in chronic humanitarian crisis, as well as forecasts for impending crisis. So how the START Fund works, one of our members can raise an alert. Within 72 hours, the decision is going to be made. And if the decision was to go ahead with that alert, the funds is going to be released within the 72 hours. And then from that time until day 45, the projects, the interventions should be implemented. And then we give additional 15 days for reporting. We think that after 45 days, organizations can go ahead and have some additional funds from HPF, country-based pool funding, or other mechanisms that are available there. So this is the first program, but we have enhanced that program in order to allow the members not to wait until the crisis is there in order to raise the alert, but to anticipate as well. Whenever the crisis is going to hit, they are seeing it as going to be hit, so that they can raise the alert before the crisis have occurred. Let's see a video about the anticipation window of the START Fund and how it works within our network.
We are a network of NGOs, and we believe that the current system providing humanitarian aid is no longer working as it should. So we have created a network that enables a faster response by organizations on the front line of crises. The START Fund is the first fund supported by multiple donors to be managed exclusively by us, NGOs. Through the START Fund, we can respond faster and earlier to under-the-radar crises, and sometimes even before they hit. We have already delivered assistance to millions of people who may have otherwise been forgotten. The START Fund works like this. Any START network member can raise an alert for a crisis. Within 24 hours, a group of humanitarian experts come together to decide whether the fund should be activated. They base their decision on third-party analysis of the context, a survey of the membership, and the collective experience of the group. If the fund is activated, then any member of the START network can put forward projects for possible funding. Humanitarians in the crisis-hit country then decide which projects to fund based on a robust, independent scoring system. From alert to final selection, it takes less than 72 hours. In the past, we had to wait until a disaster struck before activating the fund. But now, we are opening an anticipation window for the START Fund. This means when we see a crisis coming, we can respond early to mitigate predicted impacts. For instance, ensuring help is already in place before people are forced to leave their homes when escaping violence, or assessing the likely impact of an impending tropical storm on the supply of food. The anticipation window will enable us to use forecasting information to make better decisions despite the uncertainty of the situation. We have also created a new interagency network we call Forewarn, which brings together scientists and responders to analyze risks, exchange best practice, and develop new ways to measure the value of early action. The opening of the START Fund anticipation window means we will enable NGOs to respond earlier, support communities to be resilient to shocks, and help save both lives and costs.
After we have seen this brief introduction about one of our financing instruments, which is called START Fund, which is mainly used for small to medium scales, and the value of the amount of the funds is limited compared with the other instrument, which is called START Ready. So what about the larger scale crises, the one that have severe impact on the community? So for this, within the START financing facility, we have thought about something additional, which is called START Ready. So within START Ready, within START Ready, we are responding in an anticipation way for the biggest, more severe impacted hazards under something called disaster risk financing. How does that disaster risk financing work, and how we can have a system in our country in order to activate that disaster risk financing? So disaster risk financing is consisted of three main components. The first thing is that to have a scientific model that can monitor the risks and the hazards, understand what are those risks and hazards, and quantify them as much as possible. Then the second component is to have scenarios based upon those risks that we have already quantified. So what are the possible scenarios that might hit in our country? And then what is the contingency plan for each and every one of them? And then at the end, what's the funds needed in order to implement each and every one of those scenarios? And this is the third component, which is the funds. So within the disaster risk financing, or the START Ready, we have those three main components: analyzing the risks and setting triggers, And then before the triggers are launched, we agree on the plans in order to have interventions. And then we agree on the financing and positioning those financing so that when the triggers is launched, the interventions can start it. Within Start Ready, we have several instruments as well for financing. It differs based upon the level of the hazard, the scale, the severity, and the repetitiveness. So we might have national pool funds available over there, or risk pool, global pool for medium level risks. Or we might end up having an insurance for the most severe hazards that occur each decade or more. So how that DRF, disaster risk financing, work within START network? So we have a system in place in order to ensure that we have a DRF in a country. That system or that framework is called building blocks. So it is consisted of 7 blocks or 7 phases. So each one of those phases have a separate steps that together show us that we have a system that can allow us to have access to that funds before the crisis hit, so that we can respond as earlier as possible. So it starts first with locally organizations, local communities, discuss among themselves what are the hazards that they are facing, what are the gaps as well. So this is block number 1, which is what is the disaster risk financing strategy at the time being in our country? So there is a set of questions that we should ask ourselves about it. So it should be like identify and bring together a wide range of groups and organizations that have previously worked in that country. Ask them, do they have the previous experience in disaster risk financing or anticipation action? Or this is the first time that they have heard about it and they have no previous experience with it. What are those hazards that affected our country before? And are those hazards repetitive or one time happened and that's it? Are the current financing instruments and streams sufficient in our country, or there is gaps in the finance as well? So we need to tackle that gaps. What skills, expertise, and knowledge do we have within the country with the various stakeholders, governmental bodies, NGOs, IFRC, and others? What are the priority risks for START Fund or START Ready? So each one of those hazards, is it going to be covered from START Fund or is going to be covered from START Ready? And at the end, what is the current country DRF system need to be developed in order to activate a START Ready system in place? So this is the first step, which is reviewing the strategy that we have and putting it in place and confirming that, yes, at the end of the day, we need to have a disaster risk finance in our country, or no, we do not. From building block number 1 to building block number 2, we need to have a monitoring and evaluation framework and system in place. That framework, that quality framework, will allow us how we are going to engage with the various stakeholders, especially the local communities, how they are going to participate in the design of the DRF system that we are putting in place. What are the accountability mechanisms toward the downstream, towards the local communities, and upstream towards the donors as well? What are the technical quality standards that we are going to use in that interventions? And how we are going to monitor the progress in order to ensure at the end of the day, we are evaluating well the impact and the outcome. And then at the end, how we are going to manage the knowledge. So this is the second phase, which is the quality framework, which is building block number 2. Building the block number 3, it's more about what are the scenarios in the country. So let's say we have identified a number of hazards, flood, drought, and others. So for each and every one of those hazards, hitting an area, so what might be the scenarios there? Who might be the most vulnerable and most impacted from that hazard? What's the scale of that hazard in that area? so that it's going to help us to design suitable proactive intervention, to budget that intervention well, and to think how we are going to cover that budget, that cost, from start fund or from start ready or from other way of financing. So this is the contingency plan, which will allow us to have an overview about the window of opportunity. So as you know, some of those hazards might be predictable and forecasted, which means that it gives us days or weeks before the hazard attack or before the hazard is confirmed, such as drought gives us weeks, might be months, or river floods might give us days, or even hours with cyclones and tropical storms. Whereas some hazards are predictable but not forecasted, such as earthquake and sometimes the volcanoes, where some hazards at the end are not predictable at all, such as conflicts, urban fire, landslides, and flash flooding. So with unpredictable hazards, it might be easier to go ahead with the start fund, whereas with the predictable ones, we can go ahead with start ready, with disaster risk financing. In parallel with the contingency planning, we can do risk analytics, which is building block number 4. Building block number 4 will help us to have statistical models that allow us to monitor the risks and alerts and ensure that the triggers are in place so that whenever the level of hazard reach or exceeds the threshold, directly indicators are launched. So here we collect data from meteorological stations, geological stations, universities. We work with the universities in order to develop that statistical model per each hazard, per each country. And then at the end, we can show that data in a dashboard that can show us red flags when those figures, when those information exceeds the indicators that we have pre-designed or pre-agreed on, that will allow us to go ahead and start doing the interventions. So after building block number 4, which is the risk analytics, we can move on to building block number 5, which is the standard operating procedures, how members within that country are going to work with each other. So the coordination among themselves, the governing body for the DRF, who's going to be the hosting agency in order to receive the funds from START network and divide it among the members based upon this contingency plans that they have agreed on. And then at the end, what's the protocols and the pre-agreements that should be in place, the MOUs that should be in place, even with the institutional body, governmental institutional bodies as well. So who is going to do what, where, and how? What's the systems that we are going to work with for implementing those activities? Then, after building block number 5, we can easily move to building block number 6, as we have discussed before. So some of the hazards might be easier to fund it through start fund, especially those that are unpredictable. Some can be funded through the start ready, the disaster risk financing, within its 3 instruments, whether it is a national or hub funds for small scalar, predictable hazards. Some might be for risk pools that are available globally for mid-level predictable hazards, and some that are severe hazards that occurs within a decade or more, and it needs a big amount of money in order to cover that hazards. And here we are talking about insurance. So how funds are going to be divided within those several instruments for that country in order to cover the contingency plans that we have agreed on. So this is building block number 6, and then building block number 7, which is the payouts and the implementation. So the trigger is launched, financing is ready, so we can go ahead and start doing the interventions before the crisis is physically occurred. So again, this is the 7 blocks for START network disaster risk financing, starting with reviewing the strategy in the country, agreeing on a quality and performance framework, In parallel, between the contingency planning, we can do the risk analytics. And then after that, putting procedures in place that can govern the operations, agreeing on how the funds are going to be allocated, and then at the end, paying out and starting the implementation. Some of those blocks are going to be started before the trigger is launched, such as contingency planning, modeling the risks, agreeing on the finance, reviewing the hazards, and some of those blocks will start after the triggering, such as dispersing the funds, and then implementing the plans, monitoring those implementation, and then at the end, reporting and evaluation. I will give the floor right now to my colleague, Eleanor, in order to take us through a success story, particularly in Pakistan. I just wanted to highlight as well that we have two of our colleagues from Start Network that are based in Pakistan in order to answer your questions. So we have Amjad and we have Anila as well, that they can go ahead and support us with any particular questions you have on Pakistan. El, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mazen, for the comprehensive explanation of what disaster risk financing is and how it works. So over the next few slides, I will give a short overview of how the story in Pakistan has evolved from using the START fund to anticipate heat waves to developing a full disaster risk financing system. In 2017, members raised an anticipation alert for heat waves, which was not successful. Following this, the anticipation team formed a partnership with the London School of Economics, which is an academic institution in London, to develop a tool to support members to anticipate heat waves. So in 2018, with the support of the heatwave anticipation tool, the START network members in Pakistan raised another alert for heat waves, which this time was successful. And then 2 years later, in 2020, a multi-hazard disaster risk financing system was established, which also built on previous drought risk financing work. Next slide, please, Mazen. So what have we done so far? So we have a prediction model in place. We have a governance structure that fits into the wider hub structure, a pre-agreed funding distribution per region and per allocation of funds, according to vulnerability, population, and existing funding data. We also have pre-agreed project proposals to support the agencies in each region and pre-positioned funds. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if we take a look at the governance structure, I'd say that this was critical to the success of the DRF program in Pakistan. And so the highest governing body is the National Steering Committee, and they are responsible for setting the strategic vision of the hub and funding decisions. And then below that, we have hazard-specific technical working groups. So these technical working groups are comprised of technical experts for each hazard, and they're responsible for monitoring during the risk season and providing recommendations to the National Steering Committee. Next slide, please. So as we said, we've also established a risk analytics system in country. And in building out the risk analytics of the disaster risk financing system, we've partnered up with a private sector organization called JBA, who are the flood model developers, and LSE and the University of Reading. So first I'll talk about the flood model. So the flood model is using the Copernicus Global Flood Awareness System, GLOFASS. And yep, so it uses JBA's flood foresight technology that quantifies flood risk to the estimated population at risk. That covers a 10-day lead time, so for 0 to 10 days lead time. And then the drought model, which takes a look at, is a yield model forecast for the number of people likely to be affected by moderate winter drought. And this uses satellite observation of the greenness of the Earth's surface, also known as an NDVI index. And we monitor drought across Punjab and Sindh. And then, as I mentioned, we also have the heat wave forecast model. And this is, as I mentioned, it kind of builds on the earlier work with LSC. And this provides a 10-day forecast using NOAA's GFS model, and provides a heat index in several urban locations across Pakistan. And so, building on our experience from 2020, this year we're incorporating basis risk protocols that enables a triangulation of data from the models. Next slide. So we've also established contingency plans and operational protocols for each of the hazards. So as you can see on this screen, we have an operational protocol for the heat wave. We have internal protocol and guidance documents, and then we also have a technical document. So this slide essentially gives an overview of what we have and outlines what we'll be doing looking ahead. So as I said, we monitor heat wave across the months of April and June, and the heat wave model gives us a lead time of 7 days. Sorry, if I can ask participants to mute.
Sorry, Elle, but you're also on mute.
Elle, you are muted, sorry.
Oh, have I been on mute the entire time? Or just now?
No, just now.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, thank you, Anna. Yeah, so as I was just saying, we monitor heat waves across 6 cities in Pakistan, and to date we have managed to disperse 150,000 British pounds to implement early action activities across a number of these regions in Pakistan. The second of the risks that we monitor is flood, and the flood model provides us with a 0 to 10 day lead time of riverine flooding. And last year we dispersed £80,000 for a mixed early response project. In 2021, we are continuing monitoring, and the flood model covers the entire Indus Basin, which is 143 districts in total. And then the final hazard that we monitor is drought. So as I mentioned, this was developed by the University of Reading, looking at winter wheat. This hasn't activated, but we have activated the basis risk, which dispersed 300,000 earlier this year.
Thanks so much, Elle.
Over to you, Mazen.
Yes, thanks so much, Elle. Now we are going to move forward and have another case study from another country that the disaster risk financing were implemented there. And right now we are going to see a video about Senegal. So how we have implemented the DRF in Senegal over there.
From the African risk capacity against the risk of drought.
Sorry, we are going to open it from YouTube. Just bear with us a few seconds.
Spending too much time prospecting, introducing Lucia, the perfect tool for
In 2019, Life for Rural
Can you please confirm that the sound is working properly?
families in Senegal
Yes.
was already challenging as a result of a failed rainy season and poor harvests. At the end of the year, drought was predicted, putting hundreds of thousands of lives at risk in 2020. Then coronavirus hit. Climate change means droughts are becoming more frequent and more severe in Senegal. Proactively managing this relatively predictable risk is key to saving lives. With support from the German government, the START network and the government of Senegal purchased insurance policies from the African Risk Capacity against the risk of drought. When the triggers for drought were met at the end of 2019, the START network received a payout of $10.6 million to avert a humanitarian catastrophe.
6 START network members came together to deliver a large-scale response in communities at risk of an impending food crisis. Oxfam, Plan, Catholic Relief Services, World Vision, Action Against Hunger, and Save the Children were able to support families before drought hit, so they could have the best chance of surviving the oncoming lean season without resorting to skipping meals, selling their cattle, removing children from school, or making impossible choices like whether to spend money on medicines or food. This assistance was provided at a critical time. Families came out of a catastrophic raining season straight into the midst of an unprecedented health crisis.
Each agency covered a different region, carrying out a combination of cash and floor distributions and education around hygiene, nutrition, and coronavirus. Over 300,000 people across 7 regions of Senegal were protected against the worst impacts of drought in 2020.
Okay, after looking at the second success story from Senegal, we're going to conclude with a video that summarizes the system that we have talked about in order to have a DRF in our country. And then we will open the floor for questions and answers. So this is the last video that summarizes the idea that we are trying to bring over here.
Disasters are growing in number, scale, severity, and complexity, affecting an average of 350 million people every year. Advances in science, technology, and humanitarian coordination mean that we can now see hazards coming days, weeks, or even months in advance. This should mean humanitarians have time to act before a crisis occurs. And yet humanitarian crises are affecting more people and for longer. If crises are increasingly predictable, why aren't we acting earlier? Funding is slow, reactive, and response-focused, and early warning information can be hard to interpret and share, especially with people on the ground. This leaves communities exposed to unnecessary risk. We believe that we can and must do better. START Network, IFRC, FAO, WFP, and OCHA are among the humanitarian actors working with experts, scientists, and crisis-affected communities to forge a more proactive future. A pilot project rolled out in December 2018 used flood forecasting to trigger early action in Bangladesh. This included mobile cash transfers to the most vulnerable. Earlier that year, an analysis of the reliability of heatwave forecasts in Pakistan allowed START Network members to raise a timely alert and to release funding to educate people in Karachi on how to protect themselves from extreme heat. In Peru, a 5-day snow forecast was combined with existing data on vulnerability to design and implement protective measures for vulnerable communities and their livestock. Following the recent Ebola outbreak in DRC, $10 million was released for regional anticipatory action. This enabled time-critical activities by UN agencies and their partners, including positioning supplies, training health workers, and bolstering risk communication and logistics services. In 2017, humanitarians were able to support the most vulnerable herders in Mongolia due to an early warning that extreme winter temperatures would exacerbate a shortage of forage after a hot, dry summer. Animal feed and nutrients were supplied in advance along with a controlled destocking for cash program. From severe winters in Mongolia, drought in the Philippines, election violence in Kenya, and the Ebola outbreak in DRC, agencies are collaborating to act early. We are building a more proactive humanitarian system by brokering partnerships between forecasters and humanitarians, consistently collaborating on risk analysis, developing and resourcing contingency plans, pre-agreeing reliable adaptive financing, and being willing to act under uncertainty. Together we can act earlier and in a more targeted way to reduce the impact of crises or even prevent them from happening at all.
Okay, so thanks so much. And then here we go to the final aim and objective for our session, which is not only to induct you about the disaster risk financing and the other program within START Network, which is the START Fund, but also we want to move forward with that. So at the beginning of September, we are going to share a training need assessment with you, with your organizations. That's going to help us to identify the gaps for the knowledge and understanding for disaster risk financing, so that it's going to help us in order to design an advanced training program for each and every country that tackle the gaps that we are going to find. So please, I'm going to share that, and it's going to be available in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish as well. And please try to fulfill it as an organization, not as an individual. So here we are not asking you as a participant, what's your knowledge about particular thing? We are asking you as an organizational representative. So in your organization, what's your understanding about each and every one of the phases that we have discussed, the 7 phases, so that we can know which one of those phases you are having gaps in order to cover that through a training program customized to your context, and then ensuring that at the end of the day, you have a strong DRF system in your country. So we will open the floor right now to questions and answers. START Network team are happy to answer your questions. El, Amjad, Anela, myself, and others. So if you have any question, please either raise your hand or type it on chat box. So Chris, have questions? Is the TNA global or just for Pakistan agencies? No, it's global, Chris. And this is why we are asking about this TNA per each and every agency per country in order to develop a training program that fits that country. You know, what are the next countries of implementation? El, do you want to answer that question?
I'm not sure that I can answer that question, but I do know we are currently implementing in DRC. We're also implementing DRF projects across Zimbabwe, Kenya. So yes, I'm not sure whether that answers your question, Leonor, or what country you're in. So yes, hopefully that's one of the countries, and we've covered you.
And what about the other countries that you are currently working, Eleanor?
So we have DRF projects in Madagascar, Senegal, of course. Yes, and as I said, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, DRC, and Pakistan, and the Philippines and Bangladesh. So quite a number of countries, but yes, we are looking to expand, I'm sure, in future and implement many more DRF projects.
Thank you. Now the next question from Abid. It's good initiative, how we become a member of Start Ready. El, could you help us with the membership for within Start? So is there a specific membership for Start Ready, or they should be a Start Network member in order to participate in Start Ready?
This is a good question, and I'm not deep. Maybe you can expand a little bit. But in order to implement a disaster risk financing project, so one route is to be a Start Network member, and then you can participate in the development of that system and the build of that system, or in a payout, in a response. So if an agency was to act as a downstream partner of an existing Start Network member, is another way to engage with the disaster risk financing system. But this is dependent on the context and what that country has agreed in ways in which different agencies can access the disaster risk financing system. And that decision is definitely locally led, and these kind of decisions are established by members in country and kind of, yep. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Let's move forward with Rajendra from India. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon from India to everyone, and good morning to you. So not a question, just my curiosity to know about more about Start Fund Network membership, how we can apply. And another thing, as you said, preparedness and early warning system, how we can prepare ourselves based on the data. And you also mentioned a certain period to apply for response. So how much time you take to response application to Start Fund, like drought mitigation programs we have in India, because western part of India, which is adjoining to Pakistan, bordering in Rajasthan, we are facing continuously drought in this region. So we develop a proposal to mitigate drought and coping the drought mechanism, and through HelpAge International, we submitted to Start Fund Network, but no response from your side. So I want to know, without membership we submit, or you need any additional things to response from your side?
Okay, so thanks so much for those questions that you have raised. I'm trying to answer them one by one. So starting with the membership, so we haven't highlighted here in our presentation something called the hub, or the network within the network that we have. So we have at the time being 5 hubs within Start Network. One of them is India. So my friend, you can send us a separate email, and then we can refer you to the focal point on the membership, and as well as the hub in India, in order to ask them the question related to the membership within that hub. This is number one. Number two is that Start Fund the alert need to be raised by a member. Now, how the membership is going to be agreed on or accepted, this is the first question that we have answered. Please send us a separate email, and then we are going to link you with the focal point of the membership as well as the hub, India hub. This is number one. And number two, where is the Start Ready? It's only activated in several countries, the ones that Eleanor have just highlighted. So in South Asia, we have the Philippines, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and we are expanding as well. So if within the hub of India, for example, you agreed among yourselves that we need to activate the DRF, we are happy to support, and it takes about a year, more or less, in order to have a strong DRF system in place, because the DRF is a long-term intervention as we have mentioned before, for the high impact severe hazards, and it's not for as a start fund, which is for small and mid-term crisis. So we need to ensure that we have a system in place. The 7 blocks that we have highlighted takes almost more or less months to a year in order to be have a strong, robust system in place to be activated. Donna?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Donna from Uganda and West Nile sub-region specifically. I'm really grateful to be part of this induction. I've learned a lot. And in Uganda, anticipatory financing for disasters is a new concept. And I believe that with the increasing levels of crisis, especially climate related, we really need this kind of action to be more proactive. But now the question is, in my country, this is a very new concept. I do chair the Charter for Change Working Group in Uganda, and I know that most of the local and national humanitarian actors are not aware of this concept of workers-based financing. Will it be okay for me to share this opportunity for training with the members of Charter for Change Working Group so that when you're doing the capacity assessment, they will be able to access the training for those who are interested? Thank you.
Thank you, Donna, for highlighting that. And I would like to highlight that we are going to repeat this session at the first week or 2 of September and in French, so that the French speakers can also benefit from the same information that we have covered within this hour. So it's highly encouraged for your colleagues that are French speakers to attend that induction session as well. We are going to move to questions in the chat box. So from Nu'man, he said that unpredicted disasters are start ready, whereas predicted ones are from start fund. No, it's the opposite, my friend. So predicted disasters, it is covered through start ready, and the unpredicted ones, the ones that suddenly occurred or have few seconds, or we cannot predict them, such as the flash flood and landslide, it is through the start fund. And also from Naman, he's asking, Start Network members are also members of Start Ready. So the Start Ready is a program within Start Network. So any member within Start Network can have access to any of the programs within Start Network, and including Start Ready. But Start Ready, since it needs collaboration among the members, so it needs to have a strong system in place, and this is why we are only right now working through hubs, and we have 5 hubs at the time being. We are expanding the number of hubs, and so there is some exceptions that we are working as a disaster risk financing in countries that do not have hubs. So it needs a group of organizations, my friend, in a country, a group of members of SART network, in order to come to us and ask us that we want to activate a DRF in a country. Emmeline said, with the cost of maintenance of the model system, it is highly maintenance. Eleanor, I'm not sure if you can answer that about the maintenance for the model system itself.
Yes, I think definitely it is expensive. The startup costs are quite expensive, especially the model development. We've invested quite a lot in Pakistan in particular on building and developing those models. I think it definitely, the cost can vary on who you partner up with. It's always cheaper to partner up with academic institutions compared to the private model vendors. But yeah, then the cost kind of does drop, but there is, yeah, a cost, and it can vary, I suppose.
Thanks, El. Chris, additional question. He's asking about local organizations can be member within Start Network. Yes, they can be. And if you have a specific question, please send me an email and I will forward that to the network development and the membership so that they can answer you. Peter, in South Sudan, there are no proper system to monitor natural disasters in advance, as far as I know. Is there any way South Sudan can be assisted in the case, noting that floods and heat waves are becoming more frequent? So having a additional country such as South Sudan, so Kenya, as El have mentioned, is one of the countries that we are starting a DRF in that country. So having additional country as South Sudan, this is a strategic question that need to be answered by our leadership and the managers. So El, do you have a specific answer for that question about South Sudan?
No, yeah, I'd say this again, agree with you. It's a strategic one. So maybe we can come back to the members on or participants as to areas of expansion in future and follow that up after the call.
Okay. Kaysar is also asking about the membership within START Network. Please, anyone have any specific question about the membership? You know my email address. Please send me an email address and I will send that. Chris is asking about the French version. The French version, the announcement is already on our website. And an email is going to be shared as well with the members by the end of this month through the newsletter. Mushir, I'm quite curious to know about the position of fund disbursement in DRF should be in before disaster or after triggering. Yes, we hope that the funds is going to be launched before the disaster occur and directly after the trigger. In some occasions, we might be late a little bit, where it's going to be a response rather than anticipation action. But we always try to hit the objective that we have, which is releasing the funds directly after the trigger have activated in order to show that we have an anticipation action. The last few questions, we only have 1 to 2 minutes. I am Shahid from Pakistan. I have the feeling that START membership is easier for INGO rather than local organization. Again, any question related to membership, I'm happy to forward that to my colleagues. Please send me an email and I will do that. So my email address is in the chat box. I'm going to share
Mazen,
that.
I don't know whether Donna I can see her hand's been raised. So I don't know if we want to give her the floor for the last minute before we close up.
Donna, do you have anything more?
Sorry, no, sorry.
No worries at all. Is there any question from anyone would like to conclude? No. So I've shared my email address. Please, if you have any questions related to the presentation that we have made, or you have questions related to START Network, such as membership or others, I'm happy to forward that to my colleagues in order to have an answer for that. Thanks again for your attendance. Amjad, please.
Thank you, Mazen. I would first of all like to address the query which has been highlighted by one of my colleagues from Pakistan. That is, it's his feeling and impression that induction or inclusion of INGOs is much easier for in the START network for INGOs rather than NGOs. For the information of all the members, I would like to clarify here that it's the same principle and the same criteria which apply to international organization, which applies to the national organization. It's universal across the board. First is that thing we have to realize. The second is we do have 4 national organizations recently been inducted into START network. And third thing, which is very important from the perspective of localization, is initiating of localization in Pakistan, where we'll be extending membership of in-country hub to the organization, local organizations who somehow won't be able to get membership of START network. So in a way, we would be able to link all the benefits which START network offers at global level to its members, to the in-country hub members in Pakistan through START network. And that initiative is very much on the board. And by the end of this year, we will be inducting the new members. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mazen. Thank you.
Thank you, Amjad, for that clarification. Thanks everyone for your attendance. Please wait an email from us at the beginning of September for the training need assessment in order to be kindly fulfilled by yourself so that we can customize our training program based upon the gaps. Take care and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, the START team, for explaining all these things. Thank you very much.